The NFL is America's most popular sports league, but behind the touchdowns and cheerleaders lies a darker side. It's a league where fortunes are made, heroes are born, and fans like you and me lose their collective minds every Sunday. But while we're busy arguing over pass interference calls and fantasy football scores, the NFL has quietly been grappling with a whole host of issues they'd rather you didn't think about too hard. Here are the worst things the NFL doesn't want you to know about. Let's start with the elephant, or should I say, the concussed lineman in the room. For years, the NFL flat out denied any link between playing professional football and long-term brain injuries. They acted like head trauma was just a pesky rumor, like Bigfoot, or the existence of decent airline food. Meanwhile, former players, the very heart and soul of the game, were struggling with dementia, memory loss, and chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE, a degenerative brain disease. The NFL's response? They basically threw some money at the problem, like a billionaire trying to silence a disgruntled barista. They created a fund for retired players, but it was riddled with loopholes tighter than a playbook designed by Machiavelli himself. It was a classic case of too little, too late, and frankly, it reeked of something far worse than stale Gatorade. You know, for an organization that loves rules and regulations, the NFL has a funny way of dealing with players accused of domestic violence. It's almost like they have a special playbook for these situations, and spoiler alert, it involves a lot of punting on actual accountability. We've seen it time and time again. A player gets accused of assault, the league suspends them for a handful of games, and then they're welcomed back with open arms, like a prodigal son who just happened to allegedly punch someone in the face. And don't even get me started on the victim blaming and the general air of indifference. It's enough to make you wonder if the NFL stands for not freaking likely to take a stand against domestic violence. Now let's talk about race in the NFL, specifically the lack of diversity in coaching positions. For a league where the majority of players are black, the coaching ranks look whiter than a country music festival in January. It's like the NFL has this magical carousel of coaching candidates, and it only seems to stop at one particular section, the one labeled Caucasian and preferably related to a former coach. We hear a lot of talk about diversity and inclusion, but the reality on the sidelines tells a different story. It's almost like the NFL thinks the only qualifications for being a head coach are having a firm handshake and the ability to rock a headset without looking like a confused air traffic controller. Chapter 4. NFL cheerleaders. Exploited, underpaid, and silenced. Ah, cheerleaders. The smiling faces and high kicks that distract us from the crushing reality of our own athletic mediocrity. But behind those dazzling smiles and perfectly synchronized routines lies a story of exploitation, underpayment, and a whole lot of NDAs. These women put in countless hours of practice, endure grueling schedules, and all for less pay than your average Starbucks barista. They're subjected to demeaning rules and regulations, like something out of a dystopian novel where pom-poms are considered a form of currency. And heaven forbid they speak out about their treatment, because the NFL has lawyers on speed dial, ready to slap them with more legal documents than a law school library. Chapter 5. The NFL's tax-exempt status, a touchdown for billionaires. Now let's talk money, shall we? For decades, the NFL enjoyed a cozy little arrangement with the IRS. They were classified as a non-profit organization, which is about as believable as a politician refusing a bribe. This meant they paid less in taxes than a starving artist living in a rent-controlled apartment. Meanwhile, they were raking in billions from TV deals, merchandise, and enough stadium concessions to feed a small country. It was a textbook example of corporate welfare, and it took an act of Congress to finally strip them of this absurd tax-exempt status. But don't worry, they're still swimming in more money than Scrooge McDuck on payday. Chapter 6, Race Norming, the NFL's concussion settlement shame. Remember that concussion settlement we talked about earlier? Well, it gets worse. Turns out the NFL used a controversial practice called race norming to determine payouts for brain injuries. In a nutshell, they assumed that black players started with lower cognitive function than white players, which is not only incredibly offensive, but also scientifically dubious. This meant that black players had to prove a greater level of cognitive decline to receive the same amount of compensation as their white counterparts. It was like a cruel joke, a rigged game where black players were set up to fail from the start. Chapter 7. Colin Kaepernick, blackballed for taking a knee. In 2016, Colin Kaepernick, then quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers, took a knee during the national anthem to protest racial injustice and police brutality. This simple act of protest sparked a national firestorm, with many praising his courage while others condemned him as unpatriotic. The NFL, never one to miss an opportunity to prioritize profits over principles, essentially blackballed Kaepernick from the league. Despite his talent and proven track record, no team dared to sign him, fearing backlash from fans and sponsors. It was a blatant attempt to silence dissent and send a chilling message to other players: toe the line or risk your career. Chapter 8. You'd think that a multi-billion-dollar organization like the NFL would prioritize the health and safety of its players, right? Well, you'd be wrong. While the league has made some strides in recent years, player safety often feels like an afterthought, a box to be checked rather than a core value. From inadequate concussion protocols to the relentless pressure to play through pain, the NFL has a long way to go before it can claim to truly prioritize the well-being of its athletes. After all, these are human beings, not gladiators in a modern-day coliseum. Chapter 9. And speaking of money, let's talk about those shiny new stadiums that seem to pop up in cities across America. You know, the ones with more luxury boxes than affordable housing units. Well, guess who often foots the bill for these architectural marvels? That's right, the taxpayers. The NFL has become a master at squeezing public funds from cities and states, promising economic growth and civic pride. But the reality is, these stadium deals often benefit billionaire team owners and leave taxpayers holding the bag. It's a classic case of corporate welfare, with the NFL playing the role of Oliver Twist, except instead of asking for more gruel, they're demanding millions in taxpayer subsidies. Chapter 10. And finally, we come to the people at the very top of the NFL food chain, the owners. These billionaires operate with a level of impunity that would make a Roman emperor blush. From shady business dealings to personal scandals, they seem to exist in a world where consequences are for the little people. They're like the Teflon Don of the sports world. Nothing seems to stick. And the NFL, instead of holding its owners accountable, often circles the wagons, protecting their own even when it means turning a blind eye to wrongdoing. Outrow. From concussion cover-ups to racial bias, these are just a few of the things the NFL doesn't want you to know about. Whether you're a die-hard fan or a casual viewer, these issues affect the game we all love. The NFL is more than just a sport, it's a reflection of our society, with all its flaws and contradictions. So next time you're watching a game, remember that there's more to the story than what you see on the field. Share this video to spread awareness about the NFL's dark side. And don't forget to comment with a 1 if you found this informative, or a 2 if you didn't. We read every comment. Turn on notifications so you never miss our next video.